Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, freethinkers, questioning, and believers, whatever you like to call yourselves, you are welcome here. At the Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you'll never hear anything supernatural promoted from the podium. The Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics, which commits us, on the one hand, to reason and evidence-based thinking, and on the other, to compassion for our fellow human beings. These commitments motivate us to oppose magical and wishful thinking and all forms of dogma, as well as to stand firmly against all forms of racism and racial supremacy, against misogyny, against transphobia, against homophobia, against anti-Muslim bigotry, and against antisemitism. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to other conscious beings. We believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you're in the right place. So before we get started, we have a few announcements. Today after church, we have board games at the Wayward Coffee House in Ravenna. And every third Saturday, we have a secular social at Browers in Fremont. Browers is 21 and over only. The Seattle Atheists, which is not the same organization as the Seattle Atheist Church, also has a few pretty regular events. Every Sunday morning, they take a walk around Green Lake. They take out promptly at 10 a.m. From the nearby Pete's Coffee. And once a month, on the third Thursday, they have dinner together at Rosie's Pizzeria in Greenwood.
They have a book club, too.
Oh, yes.
Sunday of the month. So tonight, 6.
Gotcha. Yeah, they've got a few events up on Meetup you can check out, similar to how we have our events up on Meetup. I'd like to remind you to please RSVP, if you can, to our events on Meetup, just so that the other folks who are thinking about coming can see just the size of group that they can expect to find. It's a lot easier to be the 24th person to RSVP or to show up at a meeting than it is to be the 4th, right? Also, if you shop on Amazon, we actually are registered in the Amazon Smile program. Amazon Smile is a way for some small percentage of all of your purchases to be donated to your charity of choice. So we're registered in that program. So if you find these talks valuable and you enjoy the discussion afterwards, please consider donating to support us. Your donations allow us to rent the room, provide refreshments, and continue to foster the community that we've grown here. It takes 23 people donating $5 each week for us to break even, and any shortage is covered out of pocket by Troy and I and the Walthers. Of course, we'd love to do better than break even, so we can start to build up a surplus that would let us have a presence at community events throughout the year, like the Pride Parade and various street fairs. We can accept cash, check, and credit in person here today. We have a cash jar in the back, right over there. And we also have a donate button on our website at www.seattleatheist.church, where you can set up a monthly recurring donation if you prefer to set it and forget it. Another way to contribute is to invite your friends and family. If you know someone who you think would enjoy what we do here, invite them along. If there's someone from church that you haven't seen for a while, reach out to them and catch up, perhaps over coffee or drinks. Our discussion gets ever more valuable as we hear from more and more perspectives. Okay, so on with today's talk. Every quarter we have a planning meeting where we propose talk topics and vote to determine which one we want to schedule. And today's is Leah about anti-Semitism in the United States.
Hi. Why should a group of atheists defend an organized religion when denouncing it is the very thing that brought most of us here in the first place? Well, besides the obvious, it's the right thing to do in several key ways. These two groups are very much alike. Number one, faith in God is in no way a requirement to be a valid member of the community. Much like Atheist Church, non-religious folks are welcome no matter what they believe, as long as it aligns with some pretty secular tenets. If you conducted a survey in any given non-Orthodox synagogue, the Jews that you would meet would likely be a mix and match of faith. Spirituality, cultural Jews, or Jewish people finding a way back to our people through ritual. I just want to emphasize that so many Jews are not religious, and there's not a whole ton of pressure on them to find that religiosity. Number 2, this is a no evangelism zone. Judaism has very little to say about converting others. In order to be a Jew, you're generally born from a Jewish mother, though even that is debatable. A lot of Jewish culture ascribes to like a maternal passage of the culture, like a birthright. As the Orthodox tradition goes, a person who wants to become a Jew, like to convert, they must ask a rabbi 3 times, and every time they will be denied. No, no, no. Only on the 4th time will they be allowed to join. Not even the Orthodox want you. Just kidding. They want you to be super sure that you want to be a Jew. Basically what I'm saying is that Jews don't have an overwhelmingly strong outreach plan, and they're certainly not known for being evangelical about it, except for Jews for Jesus, who are, you guessed it, Christians in disguise. I feel the same way about the Seattle Atheist Church. Converting people to atheism does not really seem like it's at the top of our list. I think that's why I feel so at home here, because I'm never asked to ascribe to anybody's personal philosophy, but instead it's a place to bring ideas to the table and discuss them. It's the same basic foundation. Number 3, good works in non-mysterious ways. The Torah and the Talmud and any other Jewish text that you can get your hands on will either leave this out completely or blatantly say it. There is no afterlife. Jewish people aren't out there performing mitzvahs, which are good deeds, just because we're avoiding going to hell. It's actually just the right thing to do because good is good. Number 4, discussion and discourse are key. Jews are expected to question, argue, and debate over religious text, not dissimilar from atheist church. We gather, we listen, we share ideas, and we eat food. Food is really important. If it sounds like I know a whole lot about Jewish culture, it's because I do. You've had a Jew in your midst this entire time. It's me. I was raised in a mixed faith household. That would be in air quotes, because my parents are both completely devoid of religion. My mother self-identifies as an agnostic Jew, and my father came from a Christian household, but has long given up any connection to the Holy Spirit. Still, my parents agreed that because of my maternal birthright, that I should be brought up in a culturally Jewish environment. Growing up, my mother made sure that I was instilled with pride for having a Jewish heritage, though she never made mention of God. I was not pressured into any religious practices or questioned about my faith in an invisible being. Instead, my mother and I spent most of our time on the subject talking about the history of persecution that our people have faced for a long time. She wanted me to understand that I was part of a tribe, a group of people who had been made other, and that in part, this history of suffering was what brought us all together, and what made me belong. This was how I came to identify as culturally Jewish, and how she ultimately prepared me for my first anti-Semitic experience. I was a middle school student and a huge theater nerd, and I volunteered to help paint the set for our upcoming production of Grease, which I was going to star in as Rizzo. I was really good. While the rest of the group was hard at work, 2 of my classmates decided to use the paint to draw swastikas on the ground before we painted it over. They thought this was hilarious, but they found my protest to it to be even funnier. When I told them that what they'd done was wrong, they responded by goose-stepping and performing the Sieg Heil around the theater. Where were the adults in this situation? Through my tears, I managed to pick up a can of paint and throw it on them both. I ruined their clothes. They were pissed. I was stoked. When I reported the incident to my drama teacher, he thankfully defended me, punished the boys, and I escaped without any punishment. Although scarring to me at the time, this incident seems pretty tame if you look at recent American events. 2 separate reports published in January 2019 claim a 75% increase in swastika graffiti between 2016 and 2018. According to the NYPD, out of 189 hate crimes in New York City in 2018, 150 of those featured swastikas. And on February 1st, graffiti that read, "Fucking Jews," was found on the wall of a synagogue in LA. In April of this year, a gunman armed with an AR-15 style rifle fired shots inside the Chabad of Poway Synagogue in Poway, California, killing one and injuring several others, including an 8-year-old child. And I'm sure that you'll remember the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in October of 2018. 11 people died, making it the deadliest anti-Semitic attack committed in US history. If you look a little further back in America's not-so-shiny history, though you'd love to believe that we were always the Nazi killers that we were in World War II, wouldn't you? You'll find a ton of really unsavory bullshit that will leave you as it left me fuming. There are too many things for me to list, but if you would like resources after this talk, I will happily provide them to you. The point is that these atrocities aren't confined to one area, one coast, and they're certainly not confined to one country. In fact, history shows that Jews have been enslaved, cast out, and killed since literal antiquity. Saying them all out loud would eat up our time here today, and more, and I've already taken up a lot with the minuscule fraction that I've presented. But you can find timelines of this persecution from as early as the Seleucid Empire, which is ancient Greece, somewhere around 160 BCE, leading up until now. Just scrolling through the Wikipedia timeline was exhausting and much more emotional labor than I ever intended to put into this talk. So what the hell makes people hate Jews so much? Why are we an easy target, and what about us makes everybody so mad? Tumblr blog Sipora Bat Adama Biyam provides some really helpful insights, so a very large portion of what I'm about to say is paraphrased from their analysis. No one likes an other or an outgroup, and Jews are the ultimate outgroup. Here's why. Judaism was a different sort of religion in the ancient world. Rather than being paganistic, it was monotheistic, and as such, the gods of other cultures couldn't just be adopted into Jewish thought. This was a common method of cultural exchange and how many empires imposed their power. So Jewish people, by refusing to take on other gods, by and large, marked themselves out as the other. Also, it didn't help that our people originated in the Levant, which is literally the bridge between Eurasia and Africa and the crossroads of the Mediterranean world, and everyone wanted control of that bridge. So we kept being conquered and then exiled or oppressed in our homeland because we wouldn't take on other gods, and we were on land that people needed for war and trade. Even before Christianity was a thing, we were an other, and then Christianity happened. Christianity at its roots is built on the fundamental idea that Jesus of Nazareth was the Mosiah. The Messiah, or Mosiah, is a prophecy in Jewish thought about a man descended through his father from King Solomon, who would come and initiate a time of complete peace on earth, when all Jewish people would be returned to the Levant and actually control our country again. Side note that Christian Messiah and Jewish Messiah could not be more different. One promises heaven and the afterlife, the other one just goes, hey, here's that land for you to live and die on. Anyway, that meant that when Jesus showed up, Jewish people rejected him as the Messiah almost immediately in most groups, except for Jesus' disciples, because Jesus was not descended from Solomon through his dad. Also, Jewish people are really strict about the God is one thing, and even thinking that God could have an equally God son is ridiculous in Jewish thought and also not part of the Messianic tradition. Here was a big old point of contention. For Christianity to be valid in the eyes of the early church, Jesus had to be the Messiah. And if Jews weren't accepting Jesus as the Messiah, Christians had one of two choices. Either they were wrong, or Jews were wrong. Obviously, they chose the latter. Jews are wrong. And as Christians gained more power in Roman society, they began to oppress Jewish people more and more because they were literally a visible reminder that Christianity might not be right, which threatened the entire system of power that Christianity was building for itself along the scaffold provided by the Roman Empire. From the time of the end of the Roman Empire through the 1800s, almost all anti-Jewish thought was based around religious tropes and the idea that Jewish people, by rejecting the Messiah, were now agents of the devil, which means that very little of it was ethnicity-based. It's also important to note that after the guilt of the Holocaust, the United States specifically began to spread this wacky mythos that Judaism and Christianity shared this intimate and tightly knit history, like that Christianity had always respected its parent religion and that the two could be united as Judeo-Christian to the exclusion of all else. That anti-Semitism was destroyed in World War II. It's over when the camps were liberated and everything for the Jewish people is fine now. And anti-Semitism wasn't really a problem in like good Western countries before that anyway. More Anglo-Saxony, Western Europe-y than Germany. And the United States never had to improve to begin with. We were always completely against the Nazis. Go team! Anti-Semitism at its core, because Jewish people refuse to assimilate into the main culture religion. Anti-Semitism is at its core, because Jewish people refuse to assimilate into the main culture religion of their larger society that they live in. And people just do not like that. Everything else that has been used to justify and or explain anti-Semitism in an attempt to have it make sense is just that. It's justification. Pulling shit out of their asses, trying to make their hatred seem okay. We will get into some of those excuses in a moment. You might be thinking, this sounds like racism, colonialism, and other types of oppression. But here's the thing. Anti-Semitism is probably one of the oldest forms of institutionalized hatred in our society, besides misogyny. It is so old that its tropes are written into the foundation of our world. More than any other system of oppression, you're just as likely to accidentally say something anti-Semitic as you are to reference a common aphorism. Most of the Jewish characters that you watch on TV are a perfect example of this. It's like completely okay to laugh at Mort on Family Guy, the Jewish character, because we've accepted these tropes as common knowledge and we've made it okay to laugh at. Anti-Semitism is a weird form of oppression that doesn't function like other systems of oppression. In most systems of oppression, the oppressed are portrayed as weak, deserving their lower station, and lesser than the oppressors. Jewish people are portrayed as powerful and dangerous because of that power. And so in a sense, Jewish people are portrayed as the oppressors of everyone else. And thus anti-Semitism is justified because the Jewish people have it coming, they're privileged, whatever bullshit they're coming up with. This is poppycock, but it's built into the framework of anti-Semitism and thus our entire society. And it's hard to remember that if you're not a member of the oppressed group, and it's constantly in your face. Anti-Semitism doesn't really fall under any oppression umbrella. It's not really about gender and sexuality. You could say it's about race or ethnicity, but that doesn't really work either. And you could say it's about religion, but that doesn't work. It's a whole other complicated beast, coming from a time before we tried to neatly partition our world into these boxes. Oh, and I'm also not saying that because it doesn't, I'm not saying that because it doesn't fall under an umbrella that it's any worse or better than other types of oppression. They're all the same kind of bad. We need to have compassion for everyone who is oppressed for any reason. The big point is, anti-Semitism is so ingrained in the mindset of Americans, there isn't a problem anymore, and that feeds back into the aforementioned Jews are actually privileged mythos. That's why we gotta fight this. So what is anti-Semitism? How can we identify it? Well, it's a form of oppression that exists in almost every modern day society that targets Jewish people for being Jewish. Being Jewish has been defined in a lot of different ways over the years, but it's primarily an ethno-religion. This means that Judaism is the religious and cultural system for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are defined by their common ancestry from a small family of sheep herders from the ancient Middle East. So being Jewish means someone who belongs to that group of people, either through being born into it or converting, regardless of their actual practice. This weird definition of what it means to be Jewish is why it's so hard to put anti-Semitism into a neat box, oppression category-wise. It takes some stuff from racist power structures, but also those structures that are designed to keep Christianity in power. Anti-Semitism is thus built on a wide variety of tropes, prejudices, and assumptions about the Jewish people that stem all the way back to the split of Christianity and Judaism 2,000 years ago that we just talked about. It's difficult to list every single anti-Semitic stereotype because A, there's too many of them, and B, that would be really fucking depressing, but here are some common ones that you may have heard. We killed Jesus. Blood libel. We're bloodthirsty in general. We use the blood and flesh of Christian children for our food. We have horns. We're manifestations of the devil. We're here to test Christians. We're greedy, rich. We secretly control the government, the media, the economy, the world, and we have a secret club where we discuss controlling things. We're not trustworthy. We break our oaths. We'll stab you in the back. We're lizard people who, again, control the government. We tax and suck the money from everyone who isn't Jewish. We're evil, greedy capitalists. We're scary, violent communists. We smell and are unclean. We hate all the goyim, that's non-Jewish people. We cause wars, revolutions, and catastrophes. We cause the slave trade. We're lying about the Holocaust or any other anti-Semitic event. We use our oppression and past to get things, like influence in the government and the media. We're disloyal to our home countries. We're immoral. We're homeless, wandering. Ugh. If you heard some contradictory shit in there, yeah, that's what makes this all so fucking wild. But you can see how this feeds back to the unique nature of anti-Semitism. Almost all of these tropes about painting Jewish people as the source of all suffering or problems for non-Jews, and thus making them worth hating and rise up against. Jewish people are portrayed as powerful, and non-Jews are painted as the people without power who must defeat them. You can start to see the cyclical loop of how denying the problem of anti-Semitism is actually feeding into anti-Semitism. What a world we live in. I'm going to divert here for 1 second to briefly mention some further reading if anyone is interested on this particular subject. Check out John Paul Sartre's Anti-Semite and Jew for about 200 pages of analysis on this very particular matter, and I just wanted to read a quote from that really struck me while I was doing my research. The anti-Semite readily admits that the Jew is intelligent and hardworking. He will even confess himself inferior in these respects. The anti-Semite has no illusions about what he is. He considers himself an average man, modestly average, basically mediocre. There is no example of an anti-Semite's claiming individual superiority over the Jews. But you must not think that he is ashamed of his mediocrity. He takes pleasure in it. I will even assert that he has chosen it. This man fears every kind of solitariness, that of the genius as much as that of the murderer. He is the man of the crowd. However small his stature, he takes every precaution to make it smaller, lest he stand out from the herd and find himself face to face with himself. He has made himself an anti-Semite because that is something one cannot be alone. The phrase, "I hate the Jews," is one that is uttered in chorus. In pronouncing it, one attaches himself to a tradition and to a community, the tradition and community of the mediocre. Okay, I've been going on about all this for a while. You might be wondering how to address this problem. To help simplify it, I've broken it down into 5 steps. Number 1, recognizing the signs. In addition to the exhaustive lists of stereotypes that I just went over, there are some pretty common dog whistles for anti-Semitism. These include, but are not limited to, words such as globalist, cabal, using triple parentheses, you may have seen that on Twitter, worldwide, Zionist. Note, this word is often used to refer to any Jewish person as a way to legitimize hatred against them. I am not going to discuss Israel in this talk, so let's move away from that. Jew or Jewess as a noun. Someone's Jewishness being pointed out when not actually relevant. Coastal elite, Hollywood liberals, mentioning powerful Jewish individuals when, again, they don't matter for the situation. Conspiracy theories, lizard people, again, what is with that? More dog whistles are tropes such as like the hooked noses, wringing hands, piles of money, and 6-pointed stars. Okay, number 2, educate as much as possible. Use what you learn today and in any follow-up research that you do to educate others. Education is the main barrier against hatred. When people are educated, they tend to be less bigoted. Not always, but it helps. If you are a non-Jew, don't rely on Jews to do the education for you. Educating people is exhausting. Writing this talk was exhausting, but I hope that it planted a seed that you'll take forward and use for good. Number 3, utilize your privilege. If you are a non-Jew, you're in a unique position. You're not directly affected by anti-Semitism, so you can absolutely fight against it. Just be sure to evaluate your own risk in the situation and evaluate the risk of others around you before you start a discourse. Remember, fighting anti-Semitism can be legitimately dangerous. Nazis do not care about your humanity. You can get punched, doxxed, swatted, attacked, or even killed, depending on how dire the situation is. And for the love of God, do not drag Jewish people into fights that they're not already in. Take good care of yourself and of others. Number 4, step outside your comfort zone, but be realistic. Not fighting against anti-Semitism is comfortable. It's supposed to be, because society wants you to be anti-Semitic. Any fighting against anti-Semitism or other forms of bigotry is by definition uncomfortable, because society says that you should be comfortable with hatred. But you're not. That's why you want to fight it. So what's a little bit more discomfort? All of this might be out of your comfort zone, but to grow as a person and an ally and a fighter, you have to do things that you're not completely comfortable with. That's why it's hard. Are you best at confrontation? Punch away. Are you best at talking? Try to explain to the ignorant how anti-Semitism works. Are you somewhere in between? Handle lower scale conflicts. There is always something that you can do. Number 5, get your hands dirty. You gotta get out there and do things. Even if it's internet-based things, you have to act. You don't have to argue, and you don't have to physically fight, but you do have to do something. And honestly, there are other ways to really get at the root of anti-Semitism, because it is so ingrained as a part of our government, our institutions, and our history. You can utilize graffiti and other forms of subversive art to spread anti-Semitism messages. You can prep portions of your home in case Jewish people need to hide there. Prepare yourself to lie to figures of authority, especially police, if things get really dire. And again, the police are less likely to attack a Gentile than a Jew in these scenarios. You can use your privilege to lie to help a Jewish person stay safe. Anti-Semitism is dirty and it doesn't play by the rules. Neither should you. There is an old Yiddish protest song, Wir werden sie überleben, or We Will Outlive Them. As the story goes, in 1939, a group of Hasidic Jews from the Polish city of Lublin were backed up against barbed wire and ordered to sing to their own execution. One of the men began to sing in Yiddish, "Let us reconcile," but nobody joined him. Then he improvised, "Wir werden sie überleben," we will outlive them. An eyewitness at the scene reported, instantly the song took hold among the entire people until it catapulted them into a stormy and feverish dance. The commander at first laughed, but then he realized they weren't accommodating him, they were defeating him. He ordered them to stop, but they continued, even when the SS troops charged at them swinging whips and clubs. Out of all the discrimination that I have faced throughout my life, bullying, misogyny, fatphobia, anti-Semitism is the most terrifying. Being ostracized for my cultural background is an inescapable, lonely feeling, but it is not insurmountable. It is up to all of us to prevent this kind of bigotry from continuing, and it is time to fight back. We will outlive them.